Okay, well, welcome back. Are you sticking around for more? Hey, let me reflect back for a minute on day number 2 when God made the whole weather system and put it together. And there's just another little activity that we ought to do. And this one involves the air pressure. Now, all this air above us adds up to some weight. And we don't notice it because we just walk around with all this weight of the air on us, but the weather guys and gals talk about it because it controls the weather in a big way. So I wanted to check to see whether the air pressure is working today. And so just to kind of help us along, I brought a couple props here. I had a jar. I think maybe this had apple juice in it. It's all empty now. And thinking of apple juice and breakfast, I also have a hard-boiled egg that's been peeled. So do you think that we can use the Earth's air pressure to push that egg into the jar? Let's try it and see if it works. I know that's a pretty good size egg there. Now, it's not going anywhere right now because there's air in the jar pushing back and air above pushing down, so it's kind of an equilibrium. So we need to get rid of some of the air that's in the jar. And one way to do that is to build a little fire. So you have to be careful, but let's do that, and that'll drive some of the air out of the jar. I've got a little bit of cotton here, which will burn without making smoke for us. So get this in the jar and then replace the egg. We'll see if we can make it work. See if the air pressure is working here on a Saturday morning. Okay, ready for this? Ooh. In it went. Nice to know the air pressure is working just like it's supposed to. So then your next question is, well, how do you get the egg back out again? And I'd like to use this jar again sometime. So sometimes you can get it out, and what you need to do is get more pressure inside the jar. Let me get the cotton out of the way. So you get this up in the front here. Let's see if we can make this work here. I need to get a puff of air behind the egg. Not that time. Oh boy. Whew. Anybody hungry for an egg? Science demonstrations. You know, I think they're for us to enjoy more than anybody because we know who put it all together in the first place. Hey, so we carry on here. We've done days 1 and 2, and so before lunch here we have days 3 and 4. This will be where the first life shows up, plant life, and also the heavens. So anyway, here we have day number 3. See if we can get this going here. Okay, we have it here, but not on this screen. As long as you can see it, I guess we're good. Back up to that. Our verse that would go along with this would be Genesis chapter 1, verses 9 and 11, day number 3. And God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let dry land appear." Then God said, "Let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants, and trees on the land." And it was so. Apparently, up to this time, it's like water world. There's water everywhere, and God separates into a sea and into land. And we think that this early land on day number 3 was different than today. In fact, you've heard the word Pangea, one landmass. There's some truth to this, that at the beginning, all the land was in one place, and then there was one large worldwide ocean as well. Geologists try to draw pictures of what that land might have looked like, but there's a lot of guesswork there. And of course, in the background picture there, we have the earth that it is today, that the continents have been split up. Well, when did that happen? When did Pangea split up after day 3? Probably during the greatest physical catastrophe this earth has ever had. and that was the Genesis flood. There the scripture talks about the fountains of the deep breaking loose, and the whole earth's crust was fractured and cracked, and the continents were pushed apart. So anyway, this early earth on day 3 of the creation week is different from the world today, but at least we have dry land. And plants start to grow. So have a thought for you here and a couple blanks on our page. Why did God make trees? And there's lots of good reasons for trees. As it mentions here on your page, all the plants are useful for medicines. Over half of our useful medicines come from the plant world. But back to trees. Remember trees? They're good for shade. They're good for shelter. And then there are 2 special Bible reasons. And if you want to fill them in, I have the blank there. It's over in Genesis 2:9, where it says trees were made for food, apple pie, and also made just to be pleasing to look at. I like that idea. It shows God's attitude toward creation, that he made vegetation for enjoyment. Now that tells me that sometime this spring you ought to take a walk in the woods and leave your phone home and enjoy the trees that God's made. And whatever the season, whatever time of year it is, trees are pleasant to look at. So we're on day number 3 here, dry land and plants, as God continues to prepare this world for us. Now, thinking of the plant world, there are some interesting examples to consider. And so the first one I mentioned there is the ginkgo tree. And here's kind of showing a ginkgo leaf, maybe. Whoa, it's trying to stay ahead of us, I think. Now, these ginkgo leaves were found originally as fossils down deep in the geologic layers. You can see the fossil on the left. And it was assumed that ginkgo trees had lived long before people were around, and they had evolved into our modern oaks and maples that we have. Then something happened in the last century. Living ginkgo trees were found, actually over in China. And now they've been propagated all over the world. We have some ginkgo trees here in Warsaw, Winona Lake. We have a big one right on our Grace College campus. And the living trees, the leaves look exactly like the fossils do. Now, we allow some changes in nature. God built lots of variation into trees and animals, but in this case, they haven't even changed a little bit. Ginkgo leaves look exactly like God made them. So they've come up with a name for these ginkgo leaves. They're called living fossils. I don't know, do those words even go together? Aren't there kind of like opposites? You know, what this is really showing is a contradiction to evolutionary change. And we have lost a lot of critters and plants. We've lost the dinosaurs, for instance, but the ginkgo leaves are still with us. So I think that's a neat example of creation, the ginkgo. And if that's not enough, you can take these ginkgo leaves and bring them into the kitchen and put them in a blender and grind them up, and you can get this liquid out of them, ginkgo biloba. And they kind of sell that in health food stores for Mary Lou. And they say that's good for memory. That's what it is. I knew it was there somewhere. I have not used it. I'm not big into those kind of traditional methods, but maybe I could use some. And it is true that all these plants have purposes and are good to explore. So anyway, that's one example of a kind of plant that God made on day number 3. And then I had a little mention here of the beech tree. Now, those are quite common around the Midwest, and I'm just picking some example trees here just for enjoyment. So these are interesting trees. In the spring, the whole leaf forms, and it's all folded up in a pod. Then one day the pod splits, and the whole leaf just pops right out. Here, I brought an example here because the leaf was too small to see. So here's the leaf all folded up in a pod, and then one day, out it comes, my homemade beech leaf here. Now, that's kind of an interesting folding that goes on there. Kind of looks like an accordion. And when we look at things like this in nature, we start to wonder, maybe we could apply this. Maybe it's useful, and everything does turn out to be useful. It folds up, it comes apart. And one area where this thing has been made use of is the space program, because we have these big solar panels, and you have to fold them up in a rocket to get them up into orbit, and then you want them to open up. And so this kind of folding mechanism is used by NASA for their solar collectors. Here's a picture of, this is actually the space station, and the little inset shows at least part of one of their solar panels with this zigzag type folding mechanism. Learning how to improve the space program by looking at beech leaves. As we mentioned earlier, these examples of biomimicry, ideas from nature, just keep coming at us. It's a whole new way to look at science, exploring the secrets that God put there for us to use and make use of for our own well-being. Well, now here's another one that's closer to home, Indiana corn. Of course, the fields are still bare right now, but it won't be long. We'll be planting corn. We have found something interesting about corn, and the little shoot on the left-hand side kind of explains this. On a sunny day, sun hits the top of the corn shoot and goes right down the stem into the roots. And if you could dig the soil out of the way, there's light underground. These things are actually conducting light from one place to another. Now, we have a name for that. That's called, fiber optics. Isn't that a big word today? They're burying fiber optics all around. It's replacing electrical wires, and our email goes through fiber optics. It's very useful. And corn has it as well. Now, I brought some fiber optics along. It looks like fishing line here. And if this is good stuff, it's able to conduct the light from one place to another. So let's try this little experiment here. What I'm thinking is if I can shine the light in one end and see if it appears at the other end. So can you help me with this? Can you just hold this end and kind of hold this end up where the folks can see it? And I got this long strand. Oh, it's got a knot in it. Well, we'll see what it does with that. So what I have here is this laser beam. It's one of these green ones. So I'll shine it in this end and see if we can get it to come out that end. Good work. You know, if this was stretched clear across Warsaw, Winona, if it's good fiber optics, the light would come out that end. Or clear across Indiana. This traps the light inside, and on it goes. So this is very useful stuff, and they're learning how to improve this stuff and make it better. And what are they studying? Indiana corn, where God made fiber optics on day number 3, and we're just coming up with making use of it. Hey, thanks for your help. Wow, we're combining there day 3 and day 1 with light, and on it goes. I want to explore that whole area of biomimicry just a little bit more with you. And so if you have your little handout page, I have a little matching puzzle, because it does go on and on. So on the left-hand side are some objects from nature, and on the right-hand side are applications. Can you connect them? Can you match them? Take just a second and do that, and then we'll explore that together. What goes with what in our little matching puzzle? Some are easy, some not so easy. Well, we're going to keep moving along here. We don't want to get settled too much. So soap bubbles. Now that's the non-living world, but it's very useful, that kind of geometry, especially over in China. They have built whole buildings kind of based on the shape of soap bubbles. I think that's called the water cube, that building. It was part of the past Olympics. And they found out that building's very efficient, and inside the bubbles there's heat control, and it all works very well, using things like bubbles in architecture for buildings. The next one we have is coral. There's different kinds of coral. There's one called brain coral, and they have realized that the grooves on brain coral are an improvement for the tread on tires. And so using coral to design automobile tires. And so it is being done. Hey, we got 2 down and 3 to go, so they get easier now. Fish. This is an interesting one. It involves sunscreen. Now, you know, in the summertime, we have sunblock and sunscreen. You got to watch out for the sun. But some people are allergic to that kind of sunscreen stuff. And it's kind of messy, and it can get on your clothes. And so what can we do to improve sunscreen? Well, it turns out that fish, surface fish, also have to watch out for the sun. And they make their own kind of sunblock. It's that slimy material that they have on their scales. You've all touched that or smelled that before. And that's an excellent material for filtering out the sunlight. And of course, that's biodegradable, and the fish make it as it's needed. And so the thought is, maybe we can redesign sunblock using the chemical that fish use. And so that's what's coming. We're all going to smell like fish. But it'll be much more user-friendly and natural and biodegradable, so it's coming, I guess. Okay, we're getting down toward the end now as this goes. Of course, the way those woodpeckers can just hammer on a tree without getting a headache or a concussion, they have lots of built-in controls in their head, and that's being copied in bike helmets and in athletic helmets for protection, learning from creatures how to keep ourselves safe. And our last entry that we had in this little list here involved these starlings, which fly around in these huge clouds. Maybe you've seen them, and they kind of zip around, especially in the evening. And how do they do that without bumping into each other? It's just like a wave moving through the sky, thousands of these birds. And there's a whole mathematics behind that, how they operate. They're watching their nearest neighbor, and then the signal passes through the whole flock to fly around. Anyway, you can do equations for that, and then what are called algorithms. And you can build those into traffic control, especially when we start to get vehicles that do not have drivers. And so the thought is that these starlings are going to help us in driving to avoid collisions. They avoid collisions somehow, and we need to copy that. Endless examples of biomimicry, and it just kind of a delightful area to think about. So again, we have day 3 when land is formed and the plants. And since plants are alive, that brings up this whole idea of the origin of life, where it first begins on day 3. Now, friends, in days gone by, it was not realized how complicated life was. There was an assumption that maybe atoms just kind of come together and life just takes off. If you have a mud puddle with some mud in it, maybe life will form. In fact, on your page there, I put a formula. This is from like the Middle Ages for how you can make mice. Well, some grain, some moist rags, put them in a dark corner for 7 days, and mice just might appear. You know, this might work. Mice have scouts, and they're always looking for nesting places. And if they can get at it, there they will be. Of course, this whole idea was disproved. I got his picture there. Louis Pasteur, who took the rags and the grain, and he put them in a sealed container and put a top on it. Didn't know mice could get at it, and it just broke down. What we have found, of course, is that mice always come from mice. The word is biogenesis, that life comes from life, and so it has always been, and that remains another unknown in the whole science world, how life got started. We have the answer. But so it goes with this kind of a mystery. Now, it's interesting, as time goes by, things don't change all that much. And this old formula on how you can make mice is still with us. It's still being used. Let me show you what I mean. In space today, there's a big assumption that if you can find another planet, and if it might happen to have water on it and some sunlight energy, then life will show up. And you know a lot of effort goes into looking for life elsewhere, a space recipe. And you just want to graciously say, I don't think so. Life is not that simple. You don't just add water to get it. Whether it's a plant or an animal, life is exceedingly complex. We don't know the half of it yet, the closer we look into nature. So origin of plants or life, a great example of God's creative work in the first place. Another area of plants that's kind of interesting, and this is going to involve a little bit more math for you. There's this fellow by the name of Leonardo Fibonacci. I don't know if you've heard of him before, a mathematician from many centuries ago. And he came up with an interesting pattern. And so let's explore that for just a minute here. Here's his picture. Looks like they wore funny hats back in those days. Anyway, I showed you all the numbers here at once. Anyway, can you fill some of these in? Can you see the pattern? That top one there, I guess it's given away on the next line. You go 1, 2, 3, 5. These are called Fibonacci numbers. And then you come up with a number 8. Can you see where that came from? I was supposed to spring these on you one at a time, but you got them all. You're an advanced group. So what you're doing here is you're taking the two previous numbers and adding it together to get the next higher number. So 3 plus 5 is 8. 5 plus 8 is 13, and on it goes. And this gets especially interesting with those higher numbers. Now, why would I bring up math on a Saturday morning? There's something intriguing about these numbers. They tend to show up in nature more than just at random. As an example here, on the left I have a 3-leaf clover. Now remember going out and looking for a 4-leaf clover? And you can find one, but a 4-leaf clover is a mutation. It's a mistake. Clovers come with 3 petals, and 3 is a Fibonacci number, 4 is not. Now I also have a picture there of a sand dollar with 5 points on it, which is another Fibonacci number. So again, there's something about these numbers that they just tend to show up over and over again in nature. And again, the larger numbers get interesting. Now here's a sunflower, and if you count the spirals on a sunflower, you'll get the higher numbers, like 34 or 55 or higher yet. Try that sometime. You can also count the spirals on a pine cone or on the outside of a pineapple. These Fibonacci numbers, an interesting pattern. And what am I talking about here? What are we really seeing? I would suggest that these are God's fingerprint. There's some math going on here. You're adding numbers together, and God likes math, whether or not we do, and it's throughout nature, including Fibonacci numbers. So even this spring, I would challenge you to go out and count the petals on a flower. You'll find some exceptions, but it's mainly these particular numbers, or elsewhere also. We're surrounded by mathematics and interesting patterns, God's fingerprint. Just another thought on plants. These interesting spirals, the way that a vine will make. There's one on the left, and that one on the right is very interesting. I wish that we could sit down and take a closer look at it. The one on the right is a seed from Arizona, and it's a self-planting seed. It blows through the air, and the sharp point hits the sand, and then as the moisture changes, it drills itself down into the ground. So this is the deserts of Arizona where there's no people, so God set up this plant so that it could plant itself. And just another wonder of the plant world. In fact, I'm thinking about those spirals on that page, and let's try another little drawing together. Again, this is optional if you want to do this or not, but let's try a little artwork here. Can you start by making a big rectangle? Okay, doesn't matter how big it is. And now I'm going to divide it not equally. I'd like to have a big square on the left-hand side and something like this. How are you doing? Some of you are trying it. I'm going to divide this side as well and make another square on the top part. I'm going to divide this part, make another square, and on it goes. Anyway, I started with a rectangle, kind of an uneven division, and there it goes. Then what you do is you take your pen and you draw kind of a big loop here. Not with that one. Okay, and then I'll continue over here. And I'll continue down here. And if you caught the pattern, if you keep going like this, I would have to draw another box here and do that one as well. What you end up with is a kind of a mathematical drawing of a spiral, and it's the same spiral we have on the screen. And it's the same kind of spiral you would see in a seashell. And it's the same kind of spiral that you would see in a galaxy. So God likes spirals, and they're all over the place, and that's how you can draw a perfect spiral, avoiding all the math that's behind it, how that all kind of comes together. Anyway, that's all day number 3, the wonders of land and plants. And we're going to move right on. We're up to day number 4. Day 1 was light. Day 2 is water separation. Day 3, land and plants. Now, day 4 is my favorite day of the creation week. And it's when 99% of creation shows up, because it's the great heavens that we enjoy. The sun, the moon, and the stars. So we need to consider these closely. What a wonder that is when God, by the work of his fingers, fills the heavens with these neat lights. Hey, just to get us thinking about space, let me give you a couple questions here, give you some unknowns. What are we looking at here? What is this thing? Looks kind of spacey, doesn't it? The first satellite, called Sputnik. Now you got to be old to know this kind of stuff. This is 1957. And this was put up by the Soviets. And that kind of started up the whole space race, because the next year we put up a satellite, and it's been going on ever since. So that's the whole space age that we live in. These days there are thousands of satellites, communications, spy satellites, companies, the whole thing. Okay, that was one mystery picture. What are we looking at now? We've switched over to space here. The International Space Station, which has about 6 people on board usually, and round it goes. Been up there several years. This thing goes right over Indiana now and then, and you can look on the internet to see when it's going by in the evening. It looks like an airplane, except it doesn't blink. The sun reflects off it, and it's quite bright, and it just moves across the sky over several minutes. Kind of fun to watch it. It's so big you can almost see there's a little structure to it, even though it's several hundred miles up in the sky. I have one more unknown for you. What might this be that's 5 billion miles away? It's the planet that kind of got demoted. Yeah, it's Pluto. And this is the only picture we have of Pluto because it's so far out there and it's a small planet, but there's interesting structure. In fact, this picture is just from a couple years ago, the first picture we had. And could you see the lower part? There's sort of a big light area. That's a big snow field. Although when I see snow, I mean it's kind of a mixture of chemicals. In fact, I was looking more closely at this picture, and I think that snowfield looks like a Valentine. So there's Valentines in space, including on our good planet Pluto. I'm sticking up for Pluto. It's still a planet. So anyway, we are up to day number 4. This is Genesis 1:16, and God said, "Let there be 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night." And he made the stars also. Isn't that quite a majestic statement? He made the stars also, because that's quite something to say that God himself did. So anyway, let's take a look at each of these 3 areas, the sun, moon, and stars, just to get a little appreciation of them. And so we start with the sun. Well, the greater light that rules the day, just how great is it? How big is the sun? Imagine with me, what if the sun were hollow, like an Indiana basketball? Okay, now poke a little hole in it. Do you think we could fit a whole world inside the sun? This is a pretty big planet we live on. Some of you guys have traveled around the world. How many do you think we could fit in there? I got a yes down here. What do you make? Give me a number.
I think about 1 million Earths. About 1 million Earths.
I thought he was going to say like 114 or something like that. He's saying 1 million, which is exactly right. If you do the math, you could fit 1 million worlds. You want to come up here and give the rest? No, it's all right. But I appreciate your help. Yeah, the Earth would kind of rattle around inside the sun like a little BB inside a basketball. It really is the greater light that rules the day. Here's kind of a picture I'm showing the sun through some kind of a filter. Looks like I got an airplane landing on the sun. And that little circle dot there would be about the size of the Earth compared with the sun. Of course, the sun is not hollow. It's filled with radiation and chemicals and energy. In fact, the sun gives off more energy in 1 second than mankind has produced since Adam and Eve. Now, you think of all the people, the energy, the cars, the trucks, the power plants. The sun gives off more every second than all of human history. Well, is it going to run out of gas? Is the sun going to quit one of these days? All I can tell you is that the fuel tank is still on full. The sun has plenty of energy for this whole age that we live in. God provided it that way, and it's just doing what it's supposed to. Yeah, I might just explore that a little bit more, what really makes the sun shine. And as you know, the sun does not quit at night. It's always burning somewhere. And what we have the sun doing is it's nuclear energy, and it's something called nuclear fusion. So maybe you don't want this, but the slide is here, so just a comment on it. There's a formula that we saw once before, E equals mc squared. The sun is turning itself, its matter, into energy, which streams off in all directions, all the kinds of light that we've been talking about. So there is so much energy when it comes to this nuclear business. Now, if you're taking notes with a pen or a pencil, if somehow you could take a pen and turn all of its self into energy, turn the M into energy, there's enough energy in one pen. Well, there's the numbers on the screen. In the metric system, energy is measured in joules, and it's a huge number. One pencil has enough energy to take care of this whole county, all the houses, the trucks, the trains, for a year. There's incredible energy. Now, it's fortunate that it's not easy to get it out of there. Otherwise, the bad guys would have blown up the place by now. And so it takes a lot of work. But God has put all that potential into everything for limitless energy, and that's what the sun does. So we have not been able to harness very well this nuclear energy, limited, but not very much. And yet God does this all the time in the sun and in all the stars also. So anyway, that's the sun. And then we had the lesser light that rules the day, and that must be the moon. So let's think about the moon for a little while. We got its picture also. As we know, the moon does not have any energy of any light of its own. It's a reflector. Looks like we have a full moon over the desert there. Now, over the years, there's been a lot of effort to figure out how that moon got to be in our sky. I mean, there it is, circling us once a month. And there have been many different theories of where the moon came from. In fact, back in the 60s and 70s, this was one of the big reasons for the whole Apollo moon program, to go there and collect moon rocks, bring them back to Earth, and figure out the origin of the moon. Now, the Bible tells us God put the moon in the sky. But in this scientific age, we're trying to figure it out on our own. So this did happen. 12 astronauts walked around on the moon. We are still studying their samples they brought home. And the theories go on and on for how the moon got to be in our sky. Let me just review this for a minute or two. Back in the 1960s, the main idea for the origin of the moon was called the fission theory. Now that means something breaking. What do you see in this picture? A bowling pin? A turkey drumstick? What do you see? Well, the suggestion was that long ago, the Earth was spinning much faster than it does today, and some of the material just kind of stretched off the Earth and became the moon, like mud off a bicycle wheel. Well, it's an interesting idea. That'd be kind of fun to stand back in space and watch that happen, but the Earth did not spin that fast. And there's something else. There's another reason why this theory went away in 1969. Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, brought rocks back to Earth, and moon rocks do not look like Earth rocks. They'd be the very same if this happened. The moon just looks like it came from somewhere else. So that was the fission theory, and it didn't last for very long. By the way, the first person who came up with this theory was one of the sons of Charles Darwin, called George. Darwin had 10 children, and the ones who lived all went into science. And so this is his idea from his day, and it kind of came and went. Well, that was the 60s. In the 70s, the popular idea was the capture theory, that one day the moon just came from somewhere else. And it was captured by the Earth's gravity and has been going around us ever since. And if something would come close to the Earth, it definitely would feel our gravity. And you can see how it kind of swings around. But you know what would happen after about half of a turn, half a circle? Well, I kind of drew an arrow here. It'd be gone. It would take off like a stone out of a slingshot and be lost. To capture the moon, you need to slow it down, put the brakes on, insert it into orbit. And how do you do that with these, natural origin theories? So the capture idea went away and got replaced with the next one, which is the nebula theory. Now that means a cloud of gas or dust. The suggestion this time is that the Earth and the moon were big clouds of gas. And they just shrunk side by side due to gravity, and there they are. Are you getting tired of these origin theories? Fission, capture, nebula. Have you caught on to a pattern here? I've been watching this stuff for a while. Each one lasts about a decade. These origin theories, they roll on by. They cannot figure out the origin of the moon, just like they didn't know the origin of life. In fact, the origin of anything is a mystery. But, thanks for trying. Anyway, the trouble with this one is that gas clouds in space tend to spread out. A balloon wants to pop. Somehow you would have to squeeze this thing down, which you just cannot do spontaneously. So this one went away. Hey, let me show you the latest idea. This has been around since there's nothing better that's come along, and it's called the collision theory. So this is what you'd find if you would Google this today. The thought is that long ago, this large object smashed into the Earth and hit the Earth so hard that it knocked off pieces, which went into orbit around the Earth, and then they kind of coalesced together and formed the moon. The details have not been figured out yet. But anyway, it's the collision theory. And they even draw artistic type pictures of something hitting the Earth. But I just want to say, no, that's not how God set up the whole system, to have these kind of collisions that would destroy the Earth. Instead, something that I enjoy about creation, there's reasons, there's purposes for things. So let me ask you, why did God make the moon? Does it do anything for you? Would you miss the moon if it wasn't there? I know there's songs about the moon and poems and romance. What else do we have? What's the moon useful for? Now you might think of tides. Here we are in Indiana talking about the tides, but of course on the coastlines, and some of you have seen the water come and go. And the moon is a night light. I was giving a talk somewhere and a critic stood up and said, "We don't need the moonlight, we've got flashlights." And I said, "Well, thank you, sir, but for a lot of people on earth, that moonlight's useful. And certainly through all of history, the critics are just so interesting to listen to." Anyway, there are reasons for the moon, some that we know and some that we don't know. So let me just kind of start a little list here. The moon is good for all these things and more as we study our nearest neighbor, the moon. It is a night light. Some nights a full moon, some nights a crescent moon, some nights no moon at all. The sea words, you can tell time by the moon. You can tell seasons. You can tell direction. We have learned in just the last 20 years that the moon is why we have springtime. If we didn't have the moon, the Earth's axis would wobble, and we might go from winter to harder winter. You'd never know what was coming next. Thank you, Lord, for spring, for the moon, which stabilizes the tilt of our Earth so that we have our seasons. I just added the word protection there. The moon is covered with craters. It gets hit with a lot of objects from space like meteorites that would otherwise hit us. So there's kind of a protection there. Next, I mentioned the tides as the ocean waters come and go. Not that we understand those, because that's gravity, which is invisible, but the moon pulls on the water and makes it move. And the last entry that I have in this list here is life. And by that, I mean your life and mine. It kind of goes like this. What if there was no moon? Well, then there will be no tides. And the ocean is going to become stagnant because the tides are a major part of the ocean currents. The ocean will just kind of be stable. And without being stirred up, it's going to end the life that's in the ocean. There goes the sea life, and there goes the plants without the tides. Plants. Are there plants in the ocean? There's lots of them. There are floating plants. They call it the grass of the seas. But then in the shallow areas, you have the kelp forest. Now, remember how plants operate, how they breathe the opposite of us and they make oxygen? Current estimates are that sea plants make half of our air. How was I doing there? No moon, no tides, no plants in the ocean, no air, no us. Our very breath depends on that moon keeping the ocean healthy and stirred up. Purposes of the moon. Now, I'm sure I could list maybe 6 more things to that moon if we only knew them. The moon does many things for us we're not aware of. Even in an imperfect world, we can see how this has all been put together for our well-being. Well, we covered the sun. This is a little bit on the moon. One more interesting factor about the moon. As we study it from year to year, we've noticed that the moon is slowly getting further away. Have you noticed the moon getting smaller in the sky? And you say, I don't think so, because this is a very gradual motion. Actually, it's only like a couple of inches per year, and we're able to measure that. They left reflectors on the moon, and we bounce lasers off them. We can tell exactly where the moon is. And so over decades, the moon moves many feet, and over hundreds of years, it moves miles. The moon is slowly moving outward from the Earth. It has, as it orbits the Earth, it's a spiral moving out. And this is, again, hooked on with gravity and the tides. Now, that's kind of interesting, because if you back that up, that means 100 years ago, the moon was a little bit closer to us. And if you go back 1,000 years, it was closer yet. And if you go back 1 billion years, the moon is right here up against our nose. That would not be a good thing. If the moon gets that close to us, the tides would destroy the planet. Now, it's typically assumed that the moon is 4.5 billion years old. It cannot be, because even if the moon was 1 billion years old, it would be right here because of the way that it is recessing from us. What I'm expressing to you is a problem with this deep time idea. I would suggest that the moon was made during the creation week on day 4, and that this all took place about 6,000 years ago. And in a few thousand years, the moon has not moved all that much. It's when you get into the millions and the billions that you run into trouble. And I've never heard a good reply to this from the geology world of how the moon can be older than it is. It can't be as old as they say. It would have destroyed the earth. There's technical articles on that. That goes on, but we better move on ourselves. Day 4, we got the sun, we got the moon, and we got, oh yes, the stars. So how many stars are there? No one knows but God. But I'll give you an estimate on the number that we are sure of, that we've photographed. And it's a number like 1 followed by 22 zeros. Now, I'm sure that there are more than this, because every year new telescopes look further and further and see more stars. In fact, it's appearing to us that this universe may be infinite in size. God could have done that, you know. He could have made it endless. And so on and on it goes. And there's a little note on this slide as well that says God has numbered every star and named them. We all have trouble with names. God's got them all, and He keeps them all straight and keeps those stars coming out at night as well. Your handout mentions that there are many different types of stars. There's big ones called red giants. If there was one of those in our solar system, we would be inside it. They're huge. There are little white dwarf stars that are, if we had one of those for the sun, it'd be too cold. There are pulsars. These are stars that kind of blink off and on. And let me mention black holes in a little while. When you're getting into stars, you're getting into big distance. This is a large universe that we have. And so we have this concept, something called a light year. You've heard of that before? Just good to know on a Saturday morning. A light year is the distance that light would travel in a whole year. Yes, that's Buzz Lightyear there. And this distance is about 6 trillion miles. Fantastic. Not that any of us can comprehend that. The nearest nighttime star is 4 of these, 4 light years away, and then it just goes up from there. The majesty of the heavens. So anyway, thinking about all this, we're getting closer to lunch here. Hang on. I've got a little puzzle for you. On the handout, I've listed several objects. And just to get a little handle here on day 4 when God makes everything, I just kind of made this an alphabetical list. Can you take a second and kind of number these or rewrite them or something? Let's go from the nearest to the furthest. This will give us a little concept on space. Let's go from the closest to the farthest out. And you can check with each other. Just take half a minute to do this, and then we will reveal the answers. Who comes first? Who comes last? So you're saying, I don't need this, DeYoung. Quit asking me these questions. At the bottom of the list, the closest to us is going to be a shooting star. Have you seen one before? These aren't stars. They don't shoot. These are small pebbles in our upper atmosphere, maybe 50 miles high. So that's the closest thing in this whole list. The space station, about 200 miles up, definitely in space. Okay, 2 down, a few to go. Who comes next? I got my key here. our nearest space neighbor, the moon. Isn't that curious? They have not figured out where the moon came from, and it's the closest thing to us. I mean, astronomy needs a little bit of humility. Now, Pluto's quite a ways out, so let's go with the sun next. So the distances are going up here in this list. We're down to the last couple. Oh, the Big Dipper stars. Now, they average about 100 light years away. So if you go out tonight and see the Big Dipper, that light probably started in 1922, and it gets here in 2022, just so you could see it. And when you mention another galaxy, these are islands that God has spread across space. Ours is called the Milky Way. Andromeda is another one. It's far out. In fact, we think that Andromeda is about 2 million light years away. So how can we see it in a young universe? Well, I think God made it with its light thoroughly spread out so that it could be seen right away. Okay, well, give yourself an A on that one, 10 out of 10. You got them right, whether you did or not. And so someone says, this gives me a headache, these distances. I can't take it in. I can't comprehend. I don't even want to know it. But it's good to know, because this is day 4 when God makes all this stuff. So if it helps you any, this helps me to think about the hierarchy. MPG, like miles per gallon. The M is the closest thing to us, the moon. The P are the planets. That's our neighborhood. That's around the solar system. And then the G are the galaxies, which are, again, more distant. So that's kind of the list of as you go off into space and get further and further out, if that helps you. Well, I just added a few more questions at the bottom of that handout page as we finish off on day number 4. So just to think about these, there's a question about, was there a Big Bang origin for the universe? And I'll just ask that here as well. Now, the Big Bang story is that long ago, the whole universe was this little nugget. It was all concentrated together. And for some reason, one day it became unstable and started to expand and spread out. And over time, atoms formed, and then stars, and then planets, and then people. And all this, of course, is a very slow process. I don't think so. In fact, we have from Scripture the indication of what creation was like. God spoke, and it was done. He commanded, and it stood fast. That does not sound like a slow, gradual, Big Bang explosion at all. In other words, the beginning was supernatural. Now, you might say God spoke and bang, there it was. But it's not the traditional Big Bang. It's a miracle when it all came together. So really, the Big Bang theory is almost like those moon origin theories. Remember the capture of the nebula? The Big Bang will probably go away during our lifetime and get replaced by something else. Before the Big Bang was called the steady state theory, and I don't know what the next one will be, but they just roll on, roll on by. Now, there is something that's often brought up with the Big Bang. They say the universe is expanding, and it's getting larger. And that means that it was smaller in the past and smaller, kind of like starting with the Big Bang. So that's my next thought here. Is the universe expanding? And the answer is yes, it does seem to be. It looks like those distant galaxies are getting even more distant. We get this from the signal of their light. But I don't take that as evidence for the Big Bang. I reject that idea. What I would suggest happened is that when God made this universe, He made it getting larger. He made it in an expanding situation. In fact, we even have scripture that says God stretched out the universe, and it's still stretching out even further. And there's a reason for that. You have to have the universe expanding, because if you just make the galaxies and park them out there stable, if they're not moving, then they'll start to fall in, gravity will take over, everything would cave in and you would have the big crunch. But no, to have everything expanding leads to a stable universe. Likewise, we need to keep moving around the sun or we would fall into it. And the moon has to keep going around the earth or it would crash into us. You need to have all these different kinds of motions for a stable universe. So that would be my take on that, that God made the universe large and getting larger. And by the way, this might be a bit much just before lunch, but it's not that these distant stars are moving away from us in space. Space itself is expanding and getting larger and larger. But I don't know what that means. Got another question here when it comes to day 4, when God makes the universe, and that involves life in space. Are there aliens out there? Well, they make movies about it, but what's the bottom line here? Here, I got a picture of one here, and there's a flying saucer. Can you see who I put in the saucer? Well, you know, we have lived through several decades of this space age, and so far, there's not a shred of evidence of life anywhere else. It looks more and more like we are unique. Now, God could have put some life out there. I don't know why, but it appears to us that it's very empty. You know, we've looked on the moon, we've looked on Mars and light from other places, and all we get is static from space. You know what astronomers are saying these days? Where is everybody? I mean, if evolution happens, if life just forms spontaneously, then there should be lots of aliens, there should be lots of life, and we don't see any at all. It makes planet Earth and the life here more and more precious. And I think this verse kind of backs it up, that he put life on the earth everywhere, even from pole to pole, but the heavens belong to God. Now, certainly there's angel life out there, but aliens, not going to happen. So what if next year they find some microbes on Mars? If they do, we put them there. We've brought dozens of probes to Mars, and I'm sure we've contaminated the place by now of kind of, that kind of micro-type life. But we'll wait and see on that. Another interesting thing with space involves eclipses. Now, once in a while, the moon will move through the Earth's shadow, and the moon kind of gets covered up. It doesn't disappear, but it turns kind of an orange-brown color. Remember seeing that? Happens once or twice a year. Kind of interesting. Then also, once upon a time, the moon will get in front of the sun and cover up the sun. So then it gets dark in the daytime. Now here's a picture of a partial eclipse. Can you see the bite out of the sun? And now and then there's a total eclipse of the sun. And then the sun disappears for several minutes during the middle of the day. There was one 5 years ago here in the Midwest, 2017. Some of you saw it. You had to travel south a little ways. That was quite spectacular. When that happens, the stars come out, and it gets cooler, and it only lasts for some minutes. Then the moon moves on, and the sun pops out again. Well, I want to tell you that there's another one coming, and it's just a couple of years from now. And so here's the next eclipse that's going to be a total eclipse moving right across our part of the country, right through Indiana. So there's our time here, April 2024. So that's just a couple years from now. That'll be something to look forward to. Now it's going right through Indianapolis. You'd have to travel a little bit, get caught in one of those traffic jams to see it. But this is going to be making the news in the next couple of years, this total eclipse. And this is the last one that there'll be until 2099. So you don't want to miss this one. They're pretty rare. They come in twos, so we've had one, and this is the next one, and then it'll be quiet for a while, at least in this part of the country. Something very curious about these eclipses, like this one that's coming. How is it that the moon can cover up the sun? I mean, the sun is 400 times bigger than the moon, but the moon is 400 times closer. So it's a perfect fit the way they can cover each other up. That happens no place else in the solar system. We got planets, we got moons, but only here do we get that perfect match. Thank you, God, so that we can enjoy the glory of these eclipses. So anyway, that's coming, our next eclipse. A few more thoughts on on space. I skipped over the idea of black holes a few minutes ago. What is a black hole? I know they've been in the movies for quite a while. Some of the larger stars, they burn their fuel more rapidly than the sun does. And when they do that, they start to shrink. And first of all, they're big, and then they get as small as the moon, a star, then as small as a basketball, and finally the whole star just collapses into nothing. And that would be a black hole, kind of the end dot here. It's a dead star where gravity is so severe that you don't want to get anywhere near it because it would be very strong gravity. We're not sure if there are such things or not. Black holes are interesting, but we're not certain about them. But I expect that there are black holes, and God's probably made things even more exotic than this. We don't know a lot about deep space, and there are some interesting stars out there. So anyway, stay away from those black holes. They wouldn't be good for your health. Their gravity would kind of pull you apart. There are none in our vicinity, and so we're safe. Hey, just a few more things about space, just because of the delights of day number 4. God made comets. There are about 200 comets that we keep track of. The famous one is Halley's Comet, next coming back here in about 30 years. Then we have these neighboring planets. They're not mentioned on day number 4, but when God puts those lights in the sky, sun, moon, and stars, that includes these planets. Like here we have Jupiter with a big red spot on it, which is a hurricane. And then we have our favorite planet, which is Saturn with a ring. Actually, several of the outer planets have rings as well, far out. This is a star that's blown up. Stars seem to sometimes become unstable and they go to pieces and they spread off in all directions. Our sun will not do this. Our sun is a very steady star. But what this shows us is that the whole universe is wearing down. In fact, we don't really see any new stars forming. We see the ones that God made going away one by one. Scripture talks about creation waxing old like a garment, wearing down. That's what's happening, and God will return someday, maybe soon, and make a new heavens and new earth. Here's a neat little group of stars which is mentioned in Scripture, the Pleiades. And you can see that straight above us this spring in the evening sky, if you can get away from the city lights. And these stars are all gravity, has them tied together. It's called a cluster of stars. And if you like clusters of stars, this is a globular cluster. These are amazing, where you have 1 million stars that have all ganged up, and it's just one little corner of our Milky Way galaxy. So if you were in your spaceship over spring break and you were flying through space, you think you could run into this thing? Actually, you could fly right through the middle of it. All of these stars are probably a light year apart from each other. It's mostly empty space. It just looks by projection like they're all coming together. I think you'd make it, well, you might run into a star, but you probably could go right on through it and do fine. And then again, on the largest scale, we have these galaxies once again. Here's another picture of an Andromeda galaxy, these majestic islands. We live in one of these. Actually, we live kind of on the outer edge. It looks like a whole lot of stars in the middle, and it also has some spiral arms. And anyway, we're part of that whole thing. Hey, this is overwhelming, these distances and these lights. So one last slide. One thing that we learned from all this stuff, the Earth is special. I know we're a small planet compared with some of the other ones, you know, kind of one little part, but the Earth is given special attention to planet Earth. Christ walked here and is going to return, and so we were just delightful to be a part of this whole system. Hey, we made it through days 1 to 4. After lunch, we'll carry on. There's much more to say.